My parents expected me to pay off my spoiled sister's debt, but I said no and cut them off. All right, let's get started. Hey guys, so this is one of those posts where you just kind of need to vent because I don't even know where to start. Family drama is exhausting, and mine is next level lately. I'm Theo, 30 male, and if you ask anyone who knows me, they'll tell you I've been on my own since I was 18, paid for my own college, worked my butt off, and never asked my parents for anything. But apparently, that doesn't mean I get to live my life in peace. Nope, it just means I'm the family problem solver by default. It all started when my mom called me out of nowhere. Now, my mom Lorraine doesn't call for a chat. She's not the kind of mom who calls to ask how your day is or what you had for lunch. If she calls, it's because something's wrong and she needs me to fix it. So when her name popped up, I already knew this wasn't going to be good. I answered, and she jumped straight into the awkward small talk, which isn't her thing at all. Hey Theo, how's work? Still doing finance stuff? She asked like she hasn't ignored my job description for the last decade. I played along because I was curious. Yeah, mom's still doing finance. What's up? That's when she dropped it. Your sister is in trouble. Now, I wish I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't. My sister, Savannah, 27F, has a long history of creating chaos and expecting everyone else to clean it up. Over the years, her messes haven't just been minor inconveniences. They've been full-blown disasters that always seem to land on my shoulders. Take the time she borrowed my car without asking, only to crash it while texting. She called me in a panic, sobbing about how she didn't know what to do, and like an idiot, I dropped everything to help her out. I dealt with the insurance, paid the deductible, and even let her off the hook for the damage she caused because she swore she'd never do anything like that again. But she did. Or the time she convinced me to co-sign for her first apartment because she just needed a little help to get started. 3 months later, she stopped paying rent, ghosted the landlord, and left me with the fallout. I spent months fighting to fix my credit while she conveniently moved back in with our parents, acting like it wasn't a big deal. It's not just that she screws up, it's that she never faces the consequences. Every time she messes up, someone, usually me, has to step in to fix it while she plays the victim. And the worst part? She doesn't even show a hint of gratitude. It's like she thinks the world owes her a safety net. So when my mom called me about Savannah being in trouble, I didn't feel panic or concern. I felt tired. Tired of being dragged into her messes. Tired of being the one who always pays the price for her recklessness. Honestly, I was more surprised it had taken this long for something big to happen. I sighed, already dreading what I was about to hear. What kind of trouble? I asked. I wasn't asking because I wanted to help. I was asking because I wanted to know just how bad this one was going to be. Then she hit me with it. Savannah had racked up $43,500 in debt. 40 grand. I had to repeat it in my head just to process it. How does someone even get to that point? Apparently, she'd been spending money she didn't have, again. But this time, it wasn't just credit card companies she owed. She'd borrowed money from some shady people, the kind you don't just ignore when the bills pile up. And now they were coming after her. And my mom's brilliant solution to this mess? Me, obviously. Because why wouldn't it be? In her mind, I was the one with a steady job, the responsible sibling, the guy who could always be counted on to fix the unfixable. It didn't matter that Savannah screwed up. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that I wasn't rushing in to save her. You need to help her, she said, like my role as the family ATM had already been decided. I sat there for a second, letting it sink in. I asked, help how exactly? You've done so well for yourself, Theo. You could pay it off for her, she said, as casually as if she were asking me to swing by and grab takeout. I actually let out a short laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I didn't borrow that money. Why should this be my responsibility? I'm not paying anything. The silence that followed was heavy, like she was processing the fact that I just outright refused. Then she snapped, launching straight into full-blown guilt mode. She's your sister. Family helps each other. Do you want her to get hurt? Is that what you want? Her words came fast, almost frantic, like she couldn't believe I wasn't immediately jumping in to save Savannah. It wasn't a request. It was an accusation, as if my refusal was the real problem here, not the choices Savannah had made. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose it. Mom, I've helped her before. Multiple times. And what does she do? Blow it all on designer bags, fancy vacations, and God knows what else. She doesn't take responsibility for anything because you and Dad have always bailed her out. I'm not doing it this time, but apparently that logic didn't register. Savannah's struggling, Theo, she shot back. She's not like you. She's not strong enough to handle this. Struggling? I repeated. She's reckless. She spends money she doesn't have, and now she's in deep with some shady people. And instead of dealing with it herself, she's expecting me to swoop in and clean up her mess again. She's your sister. Mom snapped. Family looks out for each other. No, Mom. Family doesn't take advantage of each other. I said, my voice firm. This isn't me turning my back on Savannah. This is me refusing to enable her bad decisions. She needs to grow up and face the consequences for once. Mom wasn't having it. Do you want her to get hurt, Theo? Do you want that on your conscience? Look, I'm not heartless. I don't want anything bad to happen to Savannah. But let's be real here. She's an adult. A 27-year-old adult who knew what she was getting into when she borrowed that money. I told my mom exactly that, but she wasn't having it. She's not as strong as you, Theo, she snapped. You've always had it together, and she hasn't. You can afford to help her. It's the least you can do after all we've done for you. I said, done for me? Like what? Making me pay rent the minute I turn 18? Refusing to help with my college tuition? Yeah. Thanks for all that support, Mom. She went silent for a second, but then she came back swinging. If you don't help, we'll have no choice but to cut you off. Do you want that? I couldn't help but laugh. Cut me off from what? You don't support me. I've been on my own for over a decade. Your threats don't work on me. And with that, I hung up. After that day, they were all silent. And I wish I could tell you that was the end of it, but it was just the beginning. The silence didn't last long. I guess I underestimated just how determined my mom could be when she wanted something. After I shut her and my dad down, they shifted gears. If the direct approach wasn't going to work, they were going to guilt me into submission. And when I say they went all out, I mean all out. It started with the text, simple at first. Messages like, I just don't understand how you can let this happen to your sister. Then, as the days went by, they got more dramatic. Do you know the kind of people Savannah is dealing with? They're dangerous, Theo. I can't sleep at night worrying about her. I ignored them at first because, honestly, I didn't have the energy to deal with the manipulation. But they didn't stop. Instead, Mom stepped it up with the voice messages. And let me tell you, she's got this talent for sounding like she's holding back tears, even when she's not. Theo, she said in one, Savannah might not make it out of this if you don't help. I don't think I can live with myself if something happens to her. It was like a masterclass in guilt tripping. If they gave out awards for this kind of thing, she'd be a 3-time champion by now. Then my dad, Marshall, decided to jump in. He's usually more of a silent player in these family dramas, but not this time. He left me a voicemail that started out calm enough. Hey Theo, just calling to check in. But then, of course, it shifted. Look, I know your mom can come on a bit strong, but this is serious. Savannah's in deep, and we can't fix this without you. You've always been the strong one, the dependable one. Don't let us down now. That line, the dependable one, man, it set me off. I've spent my whole life being the dependable one, and all it's ever gotten me is more responsibility and less appreciation. Dependable doesn't mean I'm a doormat, though apparently they missed the memo. But the guilt avalanche didn't stop there. They decided to bring in reinforcements, the extended family, out of God knows where. I started hearing from my Uncle Greg, who I hadn't spoken to in years. He called me out of nowhere, acting like we were best friends. Hey Theo, long time no talk. How's life? I knew immediately why he was calling, but I let him ramble for a bit before he got to the point. You know, family's important, he said in that overly earnest tone people use when they're about to say something they know you won't like. And Savannah's she's struggling. We all go through rough patches, and sometimes we need a little help. Greg, listen, I interrupted. Did my mom put you up to this? He laughed nervously like I caught him. Well, she might have mentioned it. I didn't even let him finish. Look, I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not paying Savannah's debt. It's not my responsibility. You'd think that would have been the end of it, but nope. The next day, it was my Aunt Deborah, then my cousin Emily. They all had the same script. Savannah's in trouble. She needs help, and you're the only one who can save her. I don't understand why all of them are that concerned about Savannah. It's not like she's some helpless kid who made an honest mistake. She's a grown adult who spends money like it's Monopoly cash, and then acts shocked when the bill comes due. What made it worse was that none of them even tried to understand my side. When I explained that I wasn't willing to throw away $43,500 for someone else's mistakes, they acted like I was speaking another language. But she's your sister, they'd say, like that was supposed to magically change my mind. The worst part, though, was the smear campaign. My mom, in her infinite wisdom, decided that if guilt-tripping me directly wasn't working, she'd try to turn the rest of the family against me. She started telling everyone in the family group chat, which I left a long time ago, that I was self-absorbed, ungrateful, and a total piece of expletive. According to her, I had forgotten where I came from and was too wrapped up in my fancy city life to care about my family. I found out about this when my cousin Ryan called me. He's one of the few family members I actually get along with. And he gave me the heads up. Dude, he said, Lorraine's been talking mad crap about you. She told Aunt Deborah that you said Savannah deserves whatever happens to her. I was furious, not because I care what Deborah thinks, but because my mom was straight up lying about me to make herself look like the victim. I told Ryan the truth, that I never said anything like that. And he believed me. Yeah, I figured she was exaggerating, he said. It's just messy, man. Messy didn't even begin to cover it. But the real drama hit when Savannah decided to jump into the chaos herself. Up until then, she'd been quiet. Not a single text or call. I thought maybe she was embarrassed for once. Turns out, she was just waiting to strike. And when she did, it wasn't subtle. She texted me one night, and it wasn't a plea, it was an accusation. I can't believe how selfish you're being, Theo. You know I'm in serious trouble, and you're just sitting there doing nothing. You're supposed to be my brother. Selfish. That was laughable coming from her. Savannah's entire life had been one big string of bad decisions, always with someone else cleaning up her mess. I didn't respond. Honestly, I didn't think it deserved one. The next morning, she upped the ante. You have the money. Stop acting like it's such a big deal. Just pay it off, and I'll pay you back when I can. Like that was somehow a reasonable solution. Like I was the unreasonable one for not handing over $43,500 to fix her screw up. Again, I didn't bother to respond. That, of course, didn't go over well. She went full meltdown mode, sending me these long, rambling texts about how I was abandoning her and how I'd never understand what it's like to struggle. And then, just to twist the knife, she threw in, Mom and Dad always said you'd come around eventually. Guess they were wrong. That line hit different. Not because it made me rethink anything, but because it confirmed what I'd always known. This wasn't just Savannah being reckless. My parents had been hyping her up, making her think I'd always be there to fix her mess. By that point, I was over it. I stopped replying to texts, ignored the calls, and just focused on my own life. Just when I thought they couldn't sink any lower, the guilt trips, the ambushes, the smear campaigns, I realized I'd underestimated just how far they were willing to go. My parents and Savannah had played every card in their deck, or so I thought. Turns out, there was one last card hidden up their sleeve, and this one shattered any line I thought they wouldn't cross. I got a call from my bank, and just like that, everything turned into complete chaos. The bank's fraud department informed me about suspicious activity on my account. Apparently, someone had attempted to access it using forged documentation that didn't match their records. They had tried to change my contact details and withdraw funds, but the system flagged the attempt as suspicious and froze it. While the bank couldn't disclose specific details, they hinted that the documentation suggested it was someone close to me. Someone close to me. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. Savannah. Who else could it be? The timing was way too convenient. She had just texted me about how desperate she was, and when I didn't cave, this happened. I was boiling inside. Forging documents to access my account? That's not just desperate. That's criminal. I couldn't let this slide. That evening, I drove straight to Savannah's apartment, my anger barely contained. Without a call, of course, because I was done playing nice. She opened the door. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You try to steal from me?" I said, cutting straight to the point. Her expression shifted for a split second before she folded her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." The audacity. I told her, "Don't even try that, Savannah. The bank flagged your little stunt. They told me someone forged documents to access my account. Do you even realize how serious that is?" She let out an exaggerated sigh, as if I was being overly dramatic. "Oh, relax, Theo. It's not like I actually got anything." I blinked, stunned at how casually she brushed it off. "Relax? Are you seriously trying to defend this by saying you failed? You tried to commit fraud, Savannah. That's a crime." She shrugged, completely unbothered. "What else was I supposed to do? You left me no choice. You refused to help me when I needed it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No choice, Savannah? You had every choice. You could have owned up to your mistakes, taken responsibility, and figured out how to fix this yourself. But instead, you thought stealing from me was the solution." She scowled. "Don't act all high and mighty. Mom and Dad said you'd never let me struggle. They told me you'd come around eventually if I pushed hard enough. I just had to wait for you to get over your little tantrum." I stood there stunned. Little tantrum? That wasn't frustration boiling in my chest. It was rage. This wasn't just her being reckless. This was years of my parents coddling her, feeding her delusions, and treating me like I existed solely to clean up her messes. "Unbelievable," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "Do you even understand what you've done, Savannah? You crossed the line. A big one." She rolled her eyes, doubling down instead of backing off. "I'm not the villain here, Theo. You are. You've turned your back on family. If you just helped me in the first place, none of this would have happened." That was it. The final straw. I took a deep breath. Not because I wanted to stay calm, but because I needed to make sure I didn't say something I'd regret later. "I'm done," I said, turning toward the door. But before I left, I looked back at her one last time. "If you ever try something like this again, I won't just cut you off. I'll make sure the cops know exactly what you did. Grow up, Savannah. You're not a child anymore." I didn't wait for her response. I headed back to my car, my mind racing. How did it get this bad? How had my family gotten so toxic that my own sister thought it was okay to steal from me and blame me for it? I knew this was it. There was no coming back from this. I had to cut ties for good, but I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. My parents weren't going to let this go. Savannah wasn't going to let this go. And if they thought I was just going to roll over and take it, they were dead wrong. And I was right. The next day my mom called. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail. "Theo, your sister told me what happened," she said. "I can't believe you threatened her like that. She's struggling, and instead of helping her, you're making things worse. You should be ashamed of yourself." I played the message 3 times just to make sure I heard her right. Savannah tried to steal from me, and somehow, I was the bad guy. It was so ridiculous I didn't respond. What was the point? They weren't going to see reason, but that didn't mean I was just going to let it slide. I called my bank and asked them to tighten the security on my account. Password changes, 2-factor authentication, the works. I wasn't about to give Savannah, or anyone else, another chance to mess with my finances. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. But if there's one thing I've learned about my parents, it's that they don't take no for an answer. At least not the first 100 times you say it. Don't tell me in the comments that I could just say no because they do not understand it. So when I came home from work a few days later and found their car parked in my driveway, I wasn't exactly shocked. Annoyed? Sure. Shocked? Not at all. I took a deep breath, parked behind them, and sat in my car for a minute, mentally preparing myself. I knew they weren't here for a friendly chat. They weren't here to apologize or try to make amends. No, this was going to be another round of guilt, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. And honestly, I was already exhausted just thinking about it. When I finally stepped out of my car, my mom was standing by the front door looking like she was about to deliver some kind of lecture. My dad was staring at the ground, like he'd rather be anywhere else. The moment I got close enough, my mom said, "We need to talk." "I don't think we do, Mom." I think everything that needs to be said has already been said. She ignored me, of course. This nonsense has gone on long enough. We're your parents. Savannah is your sister. This isn't how families behave. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, fully expecting her to follow me in. And of course, she did, with Dad trailing behind her like a lost puppy. You're just going to walk away while we're talking to you? Mom snapped. No, I'm going inside my house, so I don't have to stand outside listening to more of your nonsense, I replied. If you're going to lecture me, you might as well do it where I'm comfortable. She didn't appreciate my tone, but honestly, I didn't care. She'd already crossed every boundary I'd tried to set, so why bother pretending I was okay with this? My mom wasted no time jumping into her usual spiel. Theo, you need to stop this stubbornness. Savannah is struggling, and it's your responsibility as her brother to help her. She's family. Yeah, family. I totally get it, I said. Let me tell you something about family, Mom. Family doesn't lie, steal, and manipulate to get what they want. Family doesn't expect one person to sacrifice everything while someone else coasts through life without consequences. So don't come in here lecturing me about family. My dad finally spoke up. This isn't about taking sides, Theo. It's about fixing things. You're the only one who can do that. I laughed bitterly. Fix things? You mean like paying off Savannah's debt? Covering for a fraud attempt? Letting her get away with everything like she always does? Yeah, no thanks. I'm done fixing things for her. She's your sister, Mom said, her voice rising. Do you know what it would do to her if something happened? How would you live with yourself? And how do you live with yourselves? I shot back. You've spent her entire life enabling her, making excuses for her, and throwing me under the bus whenever it's convenient. You created this problem, not me. So don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for not cleaning up your mess. Mom's face turned red. I thought she might actually explode. If you're not going to help, then we'll have no choice but to cut ties with you. No holidays, no family gatherings, nothing. I stared at her, trying to decide if she really thought that was a threat. Mom, I've been on my own my whole life. You cutting me off is like firing someone who already quit. She opened her mouth to argue, but Dad cut her off. Lorraine, stop. This isn't helping. He turned to me, his expression softer. Theo, we just want what's best for everyone. Savannah's made mistakes, sure, but she's still family. Can't you just meet us halfway? I couldn't bear it anymore. Do you even hear yourselves? You're asking me to shell out $43,500 for someone else's mistakes. How is that halfway? What is Savannah contributing to this so-called compromise? I could feel the rage boiling in my chest, my thoughts racing faster than I could speak. Every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd stepped up when they wouldn't, every single instance of them putting Savannah first, all of it slammed into me at once. I pushed off the counter, my movements deliberate, and walked to the door. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. No yelling, no arguing. They didn't deserve that much energy from me anymore. I swung the door open wide and said, "Get out." Mom blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out," I repeated. "This conversation is over. You're not going to guilt me into paying Savannah's debt, and you're not going to manipulate me into feeling bad about it. So unless you have something productive to say, you can leave." Mom looked like she wanted to argue, but Dad gently took her arm. "Come on, Lorraine, let's go." She glared at me as she walked past, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Theo. Mark my words." I shut the door behind them and stood there. It was quiet, finally quiet, but the quiet didn't last long. The whole situation had been gnawing at me, and against my better judgment, I decided to find out what was going on with Savannah. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to know how far things had spiraled. I reached out to a mutual friend who still kept in touch with her, hoping they'd fill in the blanks. "What's going on with Savannah?" I asked. "I haven't heard anything since." "Well, you know." The friend didn't hesitate. "Oh, you haven't heard? It's bad. The people she owes money to aren't messing around. They trashed her car, completely destroyed it. Windows, tires, everything. She's freaking out, saying she doesn't feel safe. I should have felt something, pity, concern, something, but all I felt was exhaustion. She'd gotten herself into this mess, and now she was reaping the consequences. Of course, I knew this would only mean one thing: more pressure from my parents to step in and save her. A few days passed, and still no direct contact from Savannah or my parents. Just silence. It felt strange, like the calm before a storm. And sure enough, the storm came, in the form of a letter from a lawyer. When I opened it, I couldn't believe what I was reading. My parents were threatening legal action, claiming I had a moral obligation to support my family. They wanted me to pay Savannah's debt, and they were actually willing to take me to court over it. I couldn't believe it. After everything they'd already done, they were willing to go this far. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but mostly I just felt numb. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a battleground, and I was done fighting. What baffled me was the sheer audacity of it all. It was almost impressive. Look how ridiculous it sounds. My own parents threatening legal action because I wouldn't clean up Savannah's $43,500 mess. It was like they'd thrown out any remaining pretense of being a family and replaced it with outright hostility. I didn't need to think twice about what to do next. The first call I made was to my lawyer, who thankfully has a good sense of humor. When I explained the situation, he chuckled and said, "Theo, they don't have a leg to stand on. Let them file if they want. It'll get laughed out of court." Sure enough, nothing came of their threat. But it was a reminder of how toxic they were, and it only reinforced my decision to go no contact. They had burned every bridge, and there was no coming back from that. Knowing they were willing to go that far was enough for me. I realized I couldn't keep this door open anymore, not even a crack. I've been holding out some tiny shred of hope that maybe, somehow, we could fix things. But this was the last straw. I blocked my parents' numbers that same day. No calls, no texts, no voicemails. I went through my social media and blocked them there too. While I was at it, I did the same for Savannah. If they were going to treat me like an enemy, then I'd treat them like strangers. I also had to tell the extended family what had happened. I knew my parents would spin the story to make me look like the villain, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. So I called up my cousin Ryan, one of the few family members I actually trust, and laid everything out. Dude, Ryan said after I finished explaining. That's insane. They seriously try to sue you? Not yet, I said. But they're threatening to. I wanted to give you the heads up because I'm sure they're going to start spreading lies about me. Don't worry, Ryan said. I've got your back. And honestly, good for you for cutting them off. They sound toxic as hell. That conversation gave me the confidence to reach out to a few other relatives. Some were supportive, like Ryan, but others? Not so much. My Aunt Deborah, for example, was firmly Team Lorraine. Theo, they're your parents, she said, as if that somehow excused everything they'd done. You can't just walk away from them. Yes, I can, I said firmly. And I have. They've crossed every line imaginable, and I'm not going to let them keep dragging me down. I knew Deborah thought I was some kind of disappointment. She said, family is family, Theo. You'll regret this someday. Maybe, I said, even though I didn't believe it. But for now, I'm choosing peace. And peace was exactly what I got. Only for a few days, though. Because, of course, about a week after I blocked them, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Theo, came my mom's voice, sharp and accusatory. You blocked me. I sighed, already regretting my decision to pick up. Yes, Mom, I blocked you. Why? Why would you do that? She demanded, as if the answer wasn't glaringly obvious. Because I'm done, I said. I'm done with the manipulation, the guilt trips, the lies, the demands. I'm done with all of it. She scoffed. You're being ridiculous. Do you really think you can just cut us out of your life like this? Yes, I said simply. I can and I have. She tried to argue, of course. She called me selfish, ungrateful, heartless, the usual. But I didn't take the bait. I just calmly repeated that I wasn't interested in continuing this conversation and hung up. Then I blocked the number. After that, I doubled down on the no-contact plan. I told Ryan to let me know if my parents or Savannah tried to reach me through him, but otherwise, I didn't want to hear anything about them. And for the most part, he respected that. Every now and then, though, he'd slip in an update. Months passed, and the longer I stayed no contact, the more I realized how much I'd been missing out on without the constant drama. I had so much more time and energy to focus on the things that actually mattered. Of course, there were still moments of doubt. Every now and then, I'd hear a voice in the back of my head saying, what if they're right? What if you were being selfish? But then I'd remind myself of everything they'd done, everything I'd endured, and the doubt would fade. Up until now, I didn't know what had happened to Savannah. Recently, I got another call from Ryan. Hey, just thought you want to know. Savannah filed for bankruptcy. I paused for a moment, letting the news sink in. Well, I said finally, maybe now she'll learn to take responsibility for her actions. Maybe, Ryan said, though we both knew it was unlikely. Savannah wasn't exactly the learn from your mistakes type. As for my parents, they kept up their smear campaign for a while, but eventually it seemed to fizzle out. I guess even their most loyal supporters got tired of hearing the same story over and over again. By the time the holidays rolled around, I felt some kind of relief because I knew I wouldn't have to spend Christmas pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Instead, I spent the holidays with friends, my chosen family, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I could just be myself without the constant weight of my parents' expectations or Savannah's demands dragging me down. Cutting them off wasn't easy. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. But looking back, I know it was the right one. Sometimes, you have to walk away from toxic people, even if they're family. And while it's not always easy, it's worth it. I still get the occasional update from Ryan, though I've made it clear I don't want to hear much. Last I heard, my parents were still trying to rebuild their reputation, and Savannah was struggling to find her footing after the conviction. I wish I could say I felt bad for them, but I don't. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. As for me, I refuse to be a fool dancing on the strings held by all of those big shots. I'm moving forward, and I've surrounded myself with people who actually care about me and respect my boundaries. I'm focusing on my career, my hobbies, and my happiness. And while I don't know what the future holds, I know one thing for sure. I'll never let anyone, family or not, drag me down again. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. If you've got toxic people in your life, I hope my story gives you the courage to stand up for yourself. You deserve better. We all do.